Hello, my darlings. Madam Raven here with another wonderful clockwork steampunk story. This one by Eric Lewis, entitled Illicit Alchemy. Unfortunately, we are unable to offer you a position at this time. Emily stopped paying attention after that. She'd heard it 100 times before, but the alchemist's mouth just kept moving, so she reached out, grabbed the glass retort off his desk, and smashed it into his fat face. Well, she fantasized about it anyway. Instead, she nodded and murmured, "Thank you for your time and kind consideration," through gritted teeth. "It's just," the man kept on, gesticulating broadly as if it helped the matter anyway. "Well, you have to understand your history, your former master." "Yes, I understand." Not caring to waste any more time, she had left the laboratory and stepped into the gloomy drizzle of the Karlsruhe streets, where better-dressed gentlemen and ladies parted around her to avoid even the hint of an association. "Thanks, Traska. You're the gift that keeps on giving." She fought back a surge of resentment at the sight of streetlights. Gas lamps were being replaced with new ones powered by Vril. They burned bright for days on a single droplet of the mysterious substance, and exploded if not maintained properly. So when the royal alchemist absconded with a liter of it to join the insurgency against the queen, his young apprentice had been tossed out of the palace, disgraced and unemployable. Idiots! If I'd had anything to do with it, I certainly wouldn't have stuck around here for the last year. She turned past a banking house that still bore the scars of a recent attack, an entire face of its slate facade blackened by explosions. Barely a microliter's worth of Vril, she thought. But for how long? She made her way from the city's more respectable districts towards the wharfs, dodging horse carriages where the streets had no lighting at all, until the stench of rancid fish and salty sea air told Emily she was almost home. Both intensified when a fishmonger passed her on his mule cart and waved, "Evening, Em. How goes the job hunting?" "Hello, Kurswell," she sighed without slowing her pace, "as I am still residing here at my oh-so-lovely seaside estate. Take a wild guess." "Sorry to hear that. My door's always open, of course." "Yeah, so are your britches." The man laughed. "Hey, I resent that remark." "You resemble that remark." He tried to play it casual, but Kurswell had made his intentions clear long ago. She wondered briefly how much he'd be willing to pay for a tumble. No, don't even think that. A stairway next to a vacant storefront led to Emily's dilapidated rooms above. A note she didn't bother to read was nailed to the door. The landlord, no doubt. She was late on the rent. Again. Let him complain. No one else is lining up to lease this rat hole. Emily flung her coat aside and felt around on top of the empty pantry until, grasping what she sought, "There you are. Been missing you all day." She thumbed open the brandy bottle and drank without bothering a glass. Drank with the abandon of one brought so low, so quickly, that food became a luxury and booze the necessity. She lay on her mattress and stared into the darkness of the rafters, listening to the mice in the walls, and imagining her hands around Traska's neck until oblivion claimed her. Another day done. Sunlight filtered through dirty glass woke her around noon. "Oh," Emily moaned, cradling her head. Do I have to do interviews today? She poured herself a cup of water, glanced at the bit of brandy still left in the bottle, and hesitated only a moment before emptying it into the cup as well. Might as well start the day off right. Let's see what that bastard's threatening me with now. She ripped open the note from the door, and after reading a few lines, almost dropped her brandied water. It wasn't from the landlord. What exactly is the job? The note had directed Emery to an abandoned warehouse on Carsolan's outskirts, far out of sight of the palace. The coach fare had eaten the last of her savings, and along the way the towering, cramped city buildings gave way to smithies, then mills, then isolated industrial parks over which coal dust clouds hovered, so that you could barely make out the mountains in the distance. "Well now, my love," said the man across the desk, who had given his name only as Neb. "I guess you could say we're a bit of a startup. Contract alchemy, doing whatever our clients need." He leaned back in his chair and flipped a silver coin between his fingers. His grin made Emily want to reach for the stiletto under her cloak. "Who's your client?" "Oh, I'm afraid that's confidential." Emily frowned. "Then what sort of alchemy?" "Also confidential." "Then how the hells can I decide?" Neb rose from his chair. "Hold up a bit. Come with me." Emery followed him out of the dust-choked office down a short hallway. "I was advised that you were more than common motivated to seek employment. Didn't expect to have to do so much convincing." "Advised by whom?" "Wait, let me guess. Confidential?" "You're catching on. I can, however, give you a peek at the facility. We got all sorted for you." Neb unlocked an iron door and pulled it open. "There now, what do you think of that?" Emily gasped. It was an alchemy laboratory. Not the kind of cobbled-together second-hand junk you'd expect in such a place, but the latest modern equipment, all new. Alembics, subliminators, hermeticizers, all manner of accessories. "It's better than at the palace. How did you—" Emily shot a look at Neb, who just raised an eyebrow. "Right." She walked along the bench, admiring the setup. New brass and fresh-blown glassware gleamed, even in the whole inadequate windowless light. Lighting can be fixed, she thought, and it'll need a better ventilation. Still, she stopped cold. At the very end of the bench lay a piece of equipment that rarely been seen outside the palace, for its only possible application was severely restricted. A shiver slithered down Emery's spine as her excitement turned sour. "I know what this job is." "Oh, that's a digestive vapor transmutation chamber," Emery replied, shooting him an accusatory glare. "Only one use for that. You're making black market vril, a task for which you are uniquely qualified. You're studied under the man who perfected the process, after all." "Are you insane? That's not just illegal, it's treason. If anyone suspects, I'd be crucified, literally." She'd meant to shout, but it came out as a hoarse rasp. Emily whipped out her stiletto and held it between them like a magic ward. Her hand shook. Whoa, calm down and put your little pricker away. You want to slow certain death by starvation over the risk of a quick one? Then I won't stop you. Be grateful that you have that choice." Neb stood to one side and held the iron door open. "Sorry to have wasted your time. Thoughts of Cursewell, landlords, brandy, and alchemists with retorts Smashed in their fat faces smoldered in Emery's brain, and the stench of fish. The weapon fell from her grasp, and some vital strength went out of her at that moment. I didn't say no, did I? You sure as hells ain't said yes, neither. She ran a hand over the equipment's pristine surfaces. The scent of mineral grease joints, like a fine perfume. Oh, how I've missed that. Then, yes. Emery took 2 coaches to the warehouse each day to avoid being followed, switching inside a crowded station house and turning her cloak inside out, red for gray. She rarely saw anyone but Neb, who stayed shut up in his office scribbling at some secret correspondence. Ventilation shafts were installed by silent workers. Gas lights replaced with alchemical phosphor lamps. Raw materials and whatever equipment she desired arrived in the night. Neb paid her in advance, and she was out of her slum to rent a finer apartment in a finer district. After weeks of labor, the day arrived when both moons were in alignment with Antibolus, the most auspicious day for such deep alchemy. Stinking of sulfur, naphtha, and other detritus of the hermetic arts, Emily opened a valve under the demi-transmutation chamber to collect 5 milliliters of refined vril. Her hand shook once more, for the merest tickle from a flame would ignite the fluid, reducing the warehouse, the buildings surrounding it, and anyone inside to a charred crater of ash. The greatest power of our age, she thought, the only magic left in the world. And I made it all on my own. The danger terrified and excited her, and for a moment Emily forgot the desperation that led her to take this job. She brought the sealed file to Neb's office and set it on his desk. He looked at her expectantly, and she nodded. Not crystal clear like the palace's stuff, but it'll work. Your client should be pleased. Our client, said Neb, beaming. Absolutely will be. Can you do more? It's a slow process and not a cheap one, but yes, I can do more. Then, love, you've just made yourself a very rich woman. Emily took a few days off to enjoy her bonus. She had a bubble bath and drank aged whiskey for the first time. She bought all new clothes and visited the only brothel on Harlot's Row that employed males to have herself pleasured until she could stand no more. Not a month before, she'd been the one considering whoring herself out. Now, never again, Emily promised, while a blond fellow with a freakishly long tongue worked between her thighs, forcing any thoughts of what use her vril might be put far from her mind. The night before collecting her second batch of vril, Emily was walking home in a tight-fitting but stylish evening gown when an odd sound drew close behind. A vehicle approached at frightening speed. One of the new steam carriages, powerful but quite dangerous. When she was certain she was about to be run down, it jerked to a stop, and 2 figures jumped out and grabbed her. What the? Stop! Let me go! Help! Rape! They tossed her into the cabin, which was closed on all sides and lit by a tiny lantern. The door locked, and the car began moving again. Don't bother, said a basso voice. Even if anyone cared to notice, these walls are iron. Incredible things, steam engines. We're quite secure in here. The bald, middle-aged man in the seat across from her seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't quite place him. Who? Oh, don't tell me you've forgotten. Junce. Her Majesty's Vice Cryptarch for Illicit Alchemy. Illicit? You? I remember. You interrogated me after Traska disappeared. What do you want? Well, let's see. 2 months ago you were destitute, living in squalor, and begging for any job you could find. Your last inquiry was an alchemical heat pack producing concern. Hardly a challenge for Traska's greatest apprentice. How did you... Seriously, child, did you imagine we wouldn't keep an eye on you? I favored disappearance entirely, be done with the whole treasonous mess. But the Queen has a soft spot for you. Thus, simple dismissal was deemed sufficient. When it appeared you weren't going to be any further trouble, I ceased watching over you. Watching over me? You had me blacklisted. I merely informed the alchemical community who it was they were considering for employment. Imagine my surprise when you turned up at the finest clothiers in Karlsruhe, with more silver than your palace stipend ever provided. Now, would you kindly illuminate me as to the source of your newfound fortune? Sweat dripped from Emily's brow in the hot, closed car. I received a loan from a relative. I wrote to him of my troubles, and he sent me some money, that's all. Oh, how generous. I don't suppose you mind providing me with the name of this relative to verify? Wouldn't do you any good. He's abroad. An uncle in Panola. John scowled. An uncle in Panola? Do you expect me to believe that? He leaned forward, reflected light dancing in the lenses of his spectacles. I think you've got into something illegal, and I want to know what it is. Then you'd better arrest me in the open and charge me. Otherwise I have nothing more to say. Emily sat back, crossed her arms, and bit her trembling lip, glowering. Jance banged on the wall of the coach. It trundled to a stop. Step lightly, girl, he said. This is terrorism we're talking about. I've the full power of the crown behind me. And if you've any involvement in this damned insurgency, I will find out. I could have you tortured. There are places deep in the palace not even the Queen cares to know about. But I'd rather not ruin such a pretty young thing. I'm giving you exactly one chance to cooperate. Emily's skin crawled. She had burned to give in and confess. But then in how much tighter in his grip would she be? Keep it together. Breathe. Well, if I hear anything, I'll be sure to let you know. Do, the cryptarch spat. I'll let you think on it, but don't take too long. One of the goons opened the door, and she ran quickly, as her brand-new clothes would allow, back to the safety of her brand-new apartment, looking over her shoulder the whole way. Before dawn, she took 3 different coaches, only to find the warehouse office empty. Neb, where are you? We have a big... Here. He emerged from the laboratory entrance. You're early. Fine coincidence, though. Someone here to see you. Yeah, I'm real popular these days. Wait, me? Here? Who? Emily tensed. Could Jance have found her again already? Our client's impressed with your work. Wants to congratulate you. Personal-like. Neb pointed behind him. Emily crept down the hallway, wishing she had a pistol on her. Not a good idea, all the vapors floating around. But when she met their client, she might have fired anyway. I should have known. Traska, Hello, my dear. It's been too long. The old man had grown gaunt and threadbare, but for all that he had a pride about him, an intensity that thickened the air. Someone older and wiser might have recognized it as fanaticism, but Emony took it for arrogance. Without a thought for her own safety, she hefted a vacuum desiccator and hurled it at the former arch-alchemist's head. Bastard! Traska dodged the vessel, and it imploded against the wall with a pop as the vacuum shattered. She jumped at him, nails aiming for his throat. Emony, calm down. Let me explain. He took hold of her wrist to keep her at bay. Damn it, will you explain? You ruined my life. Do you know what I went through after you ran off to play rebel? I'll freaking kill you. Emony felt hands grab her from behind. What in the 17th hells, Em? Neb shouted. You gone mad? It's okay. Traska breathed heavily. She has a right to be angry. She's always been emotional. Emotional? I was a day from whoring myself for food. I'm sorry. When I left, I had to do so in a hurry. I always meant to come back, take you with me. But I couldn't until I was sure the palace had lost interest in you. You mean until I had no other choice, she replied, too angry to bother telling him about her encounter with the cryptarch. You never thought to ask me if I wanted to be part of your revolt, did you? Just assume I'd follow wherever you led. Typical! Traska pulled a stool to him and sat down, suddenly looking more his age. I'm sure you see how the winds of politics are changing. The crown's time is nearly over, and we must soon have a republic. Emony laughed bitterly. Republic? Just means the aristocrats will run everything. 1,000 masters instead of one. Guess you plan to be among them. She shook free of Neb's grip and spun around. And you, where do you stand in all of this? Me? I'm a businessman, love. I stand wherever the profit is. I need you, Em, pleaded Traska. You are my best, most promising. I can only make so much frill on my own, and, well, I'm not getting any younger. You're the only one I trust, and the only one the rebels trust. I don't need an apprentice. I need a replacement. I just need a job. Traska reached into his worn jacket where a pistol bulged. Emony backed away, fearing he'd lost his patience and meant to shoot her. But he drew only a coin purse. Here, he said with a tinge of disappointment. I'd hoped you'd aim higher, but if it's money you're after, you'll have plenty. He tossed it to her, and Emony's eyes widened in surprise at the weight. Gold. You just keep making vril, while you keep blowing people up with it, she replied uncertainly. Crime and politics. Someone's always got to die. I intend to make sure it's the right ones. And you decide who those are. Like it or not, we're all going to get drawn into this. I'd rather have some say in how than be a pawn for others. Come with me, or don't. Either way, I'm done trying to convince you. Traska left angry, and Emony cleaned up the ruins of the desiccator. At the end of the day, she harvested another 7 milliliters, but instead of handing it over to Neb, she bottled and set it aside, just until I decide what to do. As Emony was leaving the carriage station near her apartment, a deafening explosion shook the district's red brick buildings. Gods, what's that? Someone shouted nearby. Another one, and it pitched the timber, left no doubt of the cause. Vril explosions. An insurgent attack. Plumes of smoke rose in the evening sky, at distant and not so distant points in the city, black against midnight blue. The final blast was mere blocks away, knocking tall hats from the heads, and the hats' owners from their feet. Citizens flooded the streets in panic, some covered in blood, and all covered in dust and ash, and Emily was swept into the fleeing throng. The flow of bodies drew her past a familiar laboratory, the same heat-pack manufacturer that had refused her employment. Palace guards were swarming the building, dragging people into large steam wagons. In the eye of this storm stood Jance. Ebony fought her way behind a corner to watch. "What is the meaning of this?" The fat alchemist was being heaved out of the door with hands bound. "All alchemists in Carl Salon are to be apprehended for questioning," said Jance, his voice full of righteous fury and more than a little fear. "This terrorism will not stand. Take them away." The man was flung into the wagon with his employees. Jance looked left, right, as if he expected some challenge to his authority. Wondering where to find me, thought Emily. She couldn't go home now. Pulling her cloak tight, she kept her head down and blended into the crowd, trying not to get trampled. After escaping the press, she found herself on the wharf, and the squeal of a mule across her path barely saved her from stumbling into a fish cart. She looked up. "Cursewell?" Didn't think I'd be seeing you again. Hey, you best get indoors. No knowing how much of this chaos is yet to come." "Cursewell, I need your help. I'm in some trouble and, well, I need a place to stay just for a few days." The fishmonger grinned. "Well now, ain't this a pleasant turn of events?" "No, not like that. Please, I'm serious. No one can know where I am." Cursewell squinted. "Say, you ain't got nothing to do with this insurgency business, do ya?" Emily bit her lip. "No, of course not." She hid in Cursewell's half-flooded cellar, with little to do but sit atop a crate in the dark, fondle her purse of gold like a jealous troll, and wait for the sound of guards' boots thumping above. Traska and Jance, two old battling saber cats, and me caught in the middle. What was it Traska had said? Decide to get involved or be used by others? She could join him or betray him to Janice. Either way, I'm a pawn, passive. Gods, I could use some brandy. But she had no brandy, and in a mind clear for the first time in a long while, a notion began to take hold. After 3 days, she came out and drew the fishmonger close. "Cursewell, do you have any buddies that could use some extra gold for one night's work?" "You kiddin'? City's on a knife's edge. Not many shoppers about the markets. Depends on the work, though. Dead men ain't got no need for gold, I know that much." "Nothing dangerous. Mostly I need to borrow carts and mules." Cursewell nodded. "Consider 'em yours. And I'll need to buy fish. Lots of fish." When the door opened, Neb leapt from his desk chair and leveled a powder pistol at the intruder. "Stop right... Emily, there you are. Where have you been?" "Nice to see you, too. I'm glad you're alive and well. I was so worried." All right. Sorry. I'm a bit flustered. I had no idea they were going to hit the city like that." "No? Exactly how did you think insurgencies work? Has anyone come here?" Neb laid his pistol on the desk next to the half-empty whiskey bottle. Barrel pointed at the door. No, not yet. I've worked hard to keep this place quiet. Listen, I need to know. Are you still with me?" "Jance is rounding up every alchemist in Carsalon, so I guess I've no choice. But it's too dangerous here. I'll start breaking down the lab. You work on finding us a new place outside the city." "But I want to see Traska one more time, though. I owe it to him to apologize. I acted foolishly the other day. Tell me, can you get another meeting? Sure, Neb said with an uncertain nod. I got my resources. When? First thing tomorrow morning, my lab. You can arrange it? Emily disassembled her equipment, disconnecting tubes and valves and glassware and bottling up mercury, salts, everything except the demi-transmutational chamber. Then she took some acid and, making sure Neb wasn't looking, dropped it into the laboratory door's deadbolt. It hissed, fizzled, and smoked, and Emery turned the lock to slide the bolt back in. That's it for today, she said as she left the warehouse. We'll move everything soon as we have somewhere to put it. Right, said Neb. Listen, don't worry about this. We'll be fine. Everything's under control. I know. Just make sure Traska's here. 8th hour on the mark. And don't forget to lock up. Emily composed a letter and delivered it, sealed, to a courier's kiosk inside the carriage station with very specific instructions, and a gold crown to ensure they were followed. In his hands only, is that clear? Tonight. Around midnight, Emily, Curswell, and a few fellow fishmongers made the slow trip to the warehouse with 2 fish carts and 6 barrels of pickled herring. After making sure all was quiet, she smashed a corner window, shimmied through, and opened the outer door from the inside. Forgive me for thinking it, whispered Curswell as he urged his mule through, but are we robbing the place? Don't worry, Emily answered. It's abandoned. Ah, salvage then. No harm in that. Emily went to the laboratory door and yanked. Iron creaked. Another pulled and flew open. The acid-corroded deadbolt crumbled to bits. After loading the equipment into carts, they upended barrels until it was hidden beneath piles of herring. Lathered with sweat and reeking of fish, Emily nodded. Good work. Keep it all covered up for now. One more thing I have to do, then it's back to the wharf, and fortunes all around. She took one last look at the emptied laboratory. Only the demi-transmutation chamber remained, and a small vial. She unstoppered and set it behind the device just out of sight, as odorless vapors diffused throughout the room. The next morning, at 8th hour, many things happened in rapid succession. Neb escorted Traska to the laboratory, just as promised. A minute later, the two began to argue over the meaning of the empty space and Emily's absence. A minute after that, 3 squads of Jance's guards converged on the building, followed by Jance himself. Quickly now, he ordered, his pistol drawn and ready. The informant said they'd not remain long. His mouth watered in anticipation of the capture he'd been promised, washing away any semblance of caution. They stormed the warehouse, the office, then the laboratory. Hands up, Jance shouted triumphantly. By order of Her Majesty, all will yield. Traska and Jance's eyes met. You bastard! Both men raised their weapons. Both weapons flashed. A millisecond later, the vril vapor permeating the lab ignited, reducing the warehouse, the buildings surrounding it, and everyone inside to a charred crater of ash. Peace mostly returned to Carlsolan when the loss of Traska and his vril forced the insurgents' retreat. Jance's disappearance was kept secret and thus not remarked upon. Yet folks still breathed easier, even if they didn't know why. Having grown somewhat accustomed to fish smell, Emily bought the entire building that had housed her old slum. and after extensive renovations, posted a sign outside in bright new paint. Open! Emily's Alchemical Emporium, offering tinctures, transmutations, and hermetic arts for needs general, personal, and industrial. And in not so fine print beneath, the disclaimer: no illicit alchemy performed. So quoth this raven,